You're an engineer and you've become a manager and a leader in your firm, but now the demands on your time are many. How can you still remain productive as a successful leader in engineering? Well, in this week's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I have with me Steve Donahue, president at Horner Shifrin. And Steve's going to talk about a lot of the things happening in the civil engineering industry, but he's also going to talk about his own personal productivity and something that he does for the first 2 hours each morning to make sure he remains productive. Before we jump in with Steve, I'd like to recognize our sponsor of the Civil Engineering CEO, Pennoni. Since Pennoni's founding more than 5 decades ago, their clients trust Pennoni's commitment to elevating the impact of projects in the communities they serve. By partnering with their clients, they establish relationships that create trust and longevity. Pennoni approaches the start of every project as the beginning of a collaboration. With the rapid change in technology, Pennoni's clients know they are getting innovative methods in delivering quality services for smart, sustainable, and resilient solutions. Pennoni is relentless in their aim to bring fresh perspective and new technologies. Pennoni measures achievement in innovation, efficiency, and excellence. Its milestones are bigger than any one project, and every project affects the community, no matter how large or small. For more information, visit Pennoni.com. That's Pennoni.com. All right, now I'd like to welcome on our guest for today. Steve Donahue is the president at Horner Shifrin. Steve, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Happy to have you here. Excited to dive into all things happening in the civil engineering industry right now. But to start us off, Steve, tell us a little bit about your company, where you're located, the services you offer, how many employees you have. Take us through the company a little bit.
Sure. Horner Shifrin is a 100% employee-owned engineering company. We are based in St. Louis, Missouri. We also have offices in Chicago, Illinois, O'Fallon, Illinois, Edwardsville, Illinois, and on the Missouri side, St. Charles, O'Fallon, and Poplar Bluff, as well as Bentonville, Arkansas. We're kind of a full-service engineering firm. It's primarily civil engineering, so water, wastewater, roads, highways, bridges, buildings, and site design. We also do mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, surveying, GIS, things like that. We have about 110 employees throughout our 8 offices, so pretty much across Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas.
That's great. So, Steve, when you got into your career and you started growing as a professional, did you have a goal for kind of becoming a high-level executive or leader in the firm? How did you get to that position? Take us through your kind of thought process and your career progression.
Right. When I started at Horner Shifrin, and I said this when I was elected as president, I really didn't have any idea that being president one day would be a possibility for me. I started at Horner Shifrin basically just one rung above the bottom. I only had a couple of years experience at the company, and just put my head down and tried to do good work, tried to take on as much responsibility as I could, tried to learn, and fortunately working for a great company that gave me the opportunities to take on that responsibility. They gave me enough rope to hang myself and made me a better engineer. And as I went along, I had the opportunity to manage one of our branch offices in Illinois. And I guess at that point, it started to click that maybe, upper management was a possibility. I really enjoyed the business side of consulting engineering, so I tried to expand my knowledge in that area. And, with a lot of good people in the company to help me along the way and work with along the way, I was fortunate to be elected president in 2016.
That's great. And, Steve, as an engineer, as a technical professional, I think we're trained analytically, of course, in school.
Right.
And, when you get into management, sometimes everything that goes along with that, or a lot of it, can be uncomfortable, right? Dealing with people, it's a whole nother side of the world of engineering. For you, was that something that when you got into it, you kind of felt like, this is something I can do? Did you kind of, or have you always been able to interact with people? Talk to us about the people side of management and leadership.
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest challenge in my progression is transitioning into that leadership role and dealing with people. Like you say, one of the jokes I throw out there is the way you tell an extroverted engineer is he stares at your knees instead of your shoes. So it really forced me to get out of my comfort zone and realize you have to interact with people, you have to lead. So that's one thing I had to work on, and I still work on today.
That's great. So, Steve, what would your team say is your management style? How do you think they would describe your management style if I asked them?
Yeah, I would hope they would say that allow them to do their job. We have many talented people at our company, professionals, and they can do their job. They don't need help from me. I'm sure there's times where I catch myself maybe getting a little too involved in a subject, and I need to just sit back and let them do their job, because in most cases, they're probably more qualified on a particular subject than me because it's right in their wheelhouse. And I need to let them do their job, which frees me up to do what I should be doing.
Yeah, and I think that step that Steve's describing there is a very challenging thing to do, right? Because as engineering professionals, we start our careers in the trenches of technical design, reports, calculations. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden one day the idea is now you got to give all that stuff away, right? And let someone else do it. And so, Steve, what's the message for some of those engineers that are making that transition right now, that are still holding on to things? What can you tell them about the importance of this in terms of, becoming a real effective leader?
Yeah, it can be very freeing. It's very challenging. If you look at an engineer that's maybe designing projects and they move into managing projects, they can't do all the work. They have to delegate it to other people to do the job. And that can be scary at times because, engineers, we like to be accurate. We want to be problem solvers, and we have to let our team do that work there again. So that frees us up to do the management things we need to do. And I know it can be scary at the beginning, but it can be very freeing as well to delegate that work to other people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the mindset that I think a lot of engineers have early on in their management careers is it's just easier if I do it myself. It's faster and easier if I do it myself. And, those words are dangerous because, it may be faster and easier if you do it yourself the first one or two times. But if it's something that you're doing over and over and it's preventing you from doing, things that you have to be doing and someone else can't do, that's where you can run into a real problem. So if that's you, where you hold on a little bit too tight, just know that as you progress in your career, you're going to have to start doing other things. In order to make room for those things, you're just going to have to give up on some of the things that you probably like to do a lot, but you're going to have to teach others how to do that. That's really important.
Correct. Yeah. Engineers are problem solvers, and when we're presented with a problem, we like to jump right in and solve it, and we need to be willing to let go and let other people who are capable or even more capable, particularly to do that, solve that problem.
So, Steve, the last few years have been a roller coaster ride for sure, for everyone in the world, not just civil engineers. But in terms of civil engineering and civil engineering firms, there has been ups and downs. And for someone like yourself, who's a leader in a firm that had to go through COVID and the remote work and everything else happening, how do you kind of try to prevent yourself from kind of over or underreacting, knowing that really the whole company is looking towards you? What's the next step for us? What are we going to do about this? How do you approach those types of situations?
Right. What I try to do, and admittedly probably don't always do because I'm human, but I think it's important for a leader to, when they're presented with, let's say, something that's considered a crisis or a big problem, such as COVID, you have to remain calm, because the people around you are watching you and trying to gauge your reaction, and they're going to develop their opinion on what your reaction is. So if you tend to overreact, it could incite some fear or uncertainty among people. So it's important to keep an even keel, gather the information, and be calm about the situation. Taking COVID as an example, we met via video weekly with our employees just to give them an update of what was going on, and I constantly tried to reinforce how well we are doing. We're a solid company. We have plenty of work. We're financially sound, and just tried to allay any fears that a pandemic wasn't going to take Horner Shifrin down.
No, that's great, and I think what you said there at the beginning is really important, staying calm, because I think that, as one goes through their career or their life, quite frankly, you may react to a lot of things, right? Oh, I got a call from the project, the contractor, something's going on. Your first analysis is, oh no. But I think as you become a leader and now people are watching your reaction and they're kind of, they're taking that energy and they're kind of going with you, right? It's very contagious. I think it's important to kind of remember, keep things calm, because everyone's going to watch. Then you could kind of figure out the rest. I know I do some coaching, youth coaching in athletics, and it's the same idea, right? If something happens on the field and I start going crazy about it, everyone on the team is going to go crazy. They're probably not going to be playing the way they can because they're not going to be thinking the way they should. And so I really like the message there from Steve, which is if you're a leader, something happens, your first, initial response should be to stay calm and figure something out. And then you can have, like you said, Steve, maybe those weekly conversations or whatever the situation yields with your team.
Correct.
And that's something that I'm sure, like everything else in leadership, comes with time and comes with experience, but it's definitely shouldn't, the importance of it definitely shouldn't be understated. So, Steve, in terms of civil engineering from a technology standpoint, there's just so much out there in terms of technology, whether there's newer and newer versions of CAD, there's BIM, there's drones, there's all kinds of stuff. How does a company like Horner Shifrin stay on top of technology and keep an eye on what's out there and make sure that your team members have the best tools available?
Yeah, one of the things that we focus on in Horner Shifrin is always having the best technology that we can afford. We try to stay on the cutting edge of technology. We have a talented staff of IT personnel that, they're constantly looking out for new technology. We invest heavily in drones and 3D scanning and things like that. And I think the size of our company allows us to be a little bit more nimble and embrace that technology. Because the engineering world is changing very rapidly. And if you're not embracing the new technology, you're going to be quickly left behind.
So how does that happen? Do you is there certain people, maybe like a committee or someone that keeps an eye on certain things? Do you have some kind of a process for that, or?
No, we have 3 IT people. They're in the technology field, so they're constantly looking out for new technology. Our CAD administrator is keeping up to date on the latest advances in CAD. He's very involved with some of our clients on developing those CAD systems. So we just have a lot of people that are looking out for the future.
That's great. No, I think that's great. And I think the thing about technology is obviously it can bring major benefits to a firm, to a professional in terms of work productivity. However, there's also costs involved, not just the cost of the technology, but the switching costs, the time associated with it. It's really a process. So I think having an IT team that's on top of this, and if you're out there and you're listening and you are a engineer maybe and you find a software, you find a technology, you may want to bring it to your company, but you should just understand that it's not as simple as, oh, we'll buy a license for this or we'll get some training for this, right? There's lots of switching and costs and timing. It's really a project in itself, a change over to a new technology. So I think it is really important, but I think everyone kind of needs to understand the process that goes into it and staying on top of that, I think is critical for all firms going forward for sure.
Correct.
So Steve, in terms of the work from home landscape or the remote virtual work landscapes post-COVID here, we're still dealing with COVID, talk about how that has changed Horner and Shifrin and what your approach to it is going forward in terms of, is there still going to be a hybrid situation? Is it going to be, kind of getting back to more in the office? Talk about that situation and how you've handled that.
Right. When the pandemic was going on, we, obviously had a lot of people and most people working from home. As it subsided a little bit, we had to think about what our policy was going to be going forward. And there again, trying to remain calm. And we held off on issuing any formal policy till, the dust settled and we really figured out how we wanted to move forward. And we settled on a hybrid policy where employees can work a couple days at home. We'd like to have them in, a few days a week because there's coordination that needs to be done. There's things that need to happen at Horner Shifrin as far as preserving the culture where we're together as a company. If we're going to have a company meeting or a lunch or something like that, it's great to have everybody in the office so we still feel that we're part of one company and not just independent contractors working for Horner Shifrin. But definitely something that changed our company and will probably continue to change. There again, being you have to be willing to change, and as we go on, we may find that we need to tweak that policy further.
Yeah, and I like the idea of remaining flexible with it and understanding that it probably is a living, breathing policy or a living, breathing situation. And I think it's been a bit of a tough situation for a lot of firms out there, just because there are some definite benefits to getting people in the office a couple days a week, like you mentioned there. However, at the same time, it's not that easy to find good professionals, or just professionals in general, I should say, out there, right? The civil engineering world is so busy. So I think companies have been kind of forced to walk this fine line of, you have to do what's best for the company culture, right? Because that affects everyone who works there. But at the same time, you also need to be aware of what other companies are doing, because if one company says everyone come back to the office and half the people say, forget that, I'm going to go to another company, I think it's just a big challenge. So I'm happy to hear that your company's been very flexible with it. You've come up with a policy, but you understand that you need to be open to it. I really think that's part of this process, is keeping a very open lines of communication with your team members there, or in general with any company, and understanding what they want, but I'm also understanding that the company has to do some things to make sure that the culture and the company can continue to grow. I think there has to be a good back and forth between the employees and the leadership, so that there can be something that kind of works for all parties involved.
Correct.
So in terms of being so busy, right, the civil engineering world is busy right now, and we have this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that is going to be bringing dollars across the country to different states through different agencies for infrastructure projects over the coming years. How do you see that affecting our industry and affecting firms like yours?
Well, it's making a problem that we already have an even bigger problem of finding talent. When you go to a conference and you talk to your colleagues, it's the only thing we seem to talk about around the coffee pot is, are you able to find people? And we are trying to find people. We have 110 people. We probably have 10 or 15 job openings right now. So we have some built-in growth if we could fill those job positions. But every company is in the same boat trying to fill positions. And the influx of money from the IIJA is only going to make that worse.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to make a current problem worse. What do you attribute the difficulty in finding professionals to in our industry?
Right. I think we're just not, producing enough engineers. I think there's been something, over the past few years, it doesn't seem like we're producing enough. One thing I noticed, even back when I was in college in the early 90s, there were companies coming on campus to recruit engineers. They weren't engineering companies. One in particular was just a national business consulting company, and they weren't looking to hire engineers per se. They were looking for smart people, and civil engineers are smart people. So not only are we not producing enough, but I think the ones we are producing, they may not practice civil engineering in their careers.
It's funny, I'm laughing because when I graduated from college, that same one of those companies was on our campus, and I interviewed with them. And I think they said they might have interviewed a couple of hundred people, and they only gave about 10 job offerings, and I got one of them. And I'm thinking to myself, I wanted to go into engineering. I don't know why they want to hire me. And basically what they said to me was like, if you've been trained as an engineer, we can teach you a lot of the other stuff that we need to teach you. And I think the challenge, too, was that, if I recall, the salary was much higher than the civil engineering firm salaries that I was getting offered. So I did end up going with a civil engineering firm because I kind of had my heart set on civil engineering, but I could easily see how many people would jump to another opportunity like that, right, because it's available.
Correct.
And so, I agree that. I mean, there's lots of competition out there, and I think that gets back to an industry problem that we all need to try to solve, which is we have a great profession in civil engineering. It's very exciting, and there are a lot of things that you can do as a civil engineer. We just need to communicate that better to people at a younger age. And I know that organizations like ASCE has done a lot of work on that, and I applaud them for that, but I think we still have a lot of work left to do in that regard.
Yeah, one of the things we try to do is highlight the benefits and the good we do for society. When we get done with a project and say it's a water treatment plant. It's not just a water treatment plant. It's a community that it's now going to have a lot cleaner water than they used to have. And you're really doing something good for society. When you design that road, there's people that are going to get not be stuck in traffic, and they're going to get home to their kid's soccer game, or heaven forbid, they're not going to get in an accident because the road's much safer now. So we try to portray the work we do as really benefiting society. It's not just, hey, look at this neat project, but we're really improving the quality of life of people around us.
Yeah, I think that's important, and not only in communicating to those maybe interested in our industry, but I think also just working civil engineers. I think when, as a leader, if you communicate the purpose of your projects to the people that are working on those projects, it kind of gives them, they get kind of really bought into those projects on a deeper perspective than, hey, 90% drawings are due, so we got to make sure we get all these drawings done. It's like, no, by doing this project, we're going to reduce accidents on this road by X percent, and now you've got, we're saving people's lives essentially. And I think that
Correct.
That message that Steve's referring to is something that even if you're a leader in the field already, you should be communicating that to the people that work on your projects, because I think that that's what makes the industry such a great industry, quite frankly.
Yep.
So, Steve, one of the things that a lot of companies are focusing on today, and with good reason, is diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that and the importance of diversity and inclusion in a growing firm?
Yes. Having a diverse workforce is super important. Our HR director works on recruiting people from diverse backgrounds, and all people are included at Horner Shifrin. We find that having people that come from different experiences can help projects. They can bring their personal experiences to bear. So we find that a great value in making smart decisions, not only for our company, but for our projects.
No, I think it's great, and the reason I asked the question is because it's unfortunate, but I think that there are companies that still aren't focusing on this, and I think that it's not a good thing. And to Steve's point, the more diverse of a background that you have within your firm, there's different perspectives, different skill sets, different ideas that get brought to the table. You're actually going to be able to serve your clients better because you're going to be able to bring more diverse solutions to the table.
Absolutely.
So I think it is really important. I'm glad to hear that Horner and Shifrin's focused on it. And, if you're out there listening, think of ways to, increase diversity and inclusion in your company, however you can do that. Maybe part of your hiring process. Maybe it's part of when you're going out to career fairs or where you're going to look for engineering professionals. I think all these things factor in. All right, so we're going to switch it up a little bit now, Steve. I'm going to throw some questions at you that we often get from developing civil engineers and kind of get your take on that. All right, so what is the number one trait that you feel is important for civil engineering professionals to have today?
There's probably three, but if I had to boil it down to just one, I would say communication skills. Civil engineering is a team sport. You have to work together as a team. You have to communicate as a team. You have to communicate to your clients what's going on. So it is super important that we are able to share ideas and information. If a piece of information isn't communicated to the right people, it can cause problems in the projects. It can cause projects to not be designed correctly. So as engineers, we have to hone in our communication skills, and, looking at civil engineers in general, that's probably something that doesn't come as easy as most people, to be good communicators.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think if you look at some of the civil engineers that have become leaders in their firms, I think you'll see a pattern amongst them that they're really great communicators. It's not by mistake that they got to that position. And so for those of you out there that are developing your career, you can look for ways to build those skills. For example, joining a Toastmasters group and speaking in public a little bit can give you some confidence and sharpen some of your conversational skills. Going and joining online. There's online groups where you can go and learn about communication. You could read a book on communication, right? Even if your company maybe isn't supplying that training for you right now at this stage in your career, it's going to really benefit you to sharpen those communication skills however you can. So definitely try to take some action on that one. Here's another question that we get from time to time, Steve. How can I make sure that I'm adding value to my organization? What would you say to someone who's asking that question?
Correct. I would say one thing that individuals can do is improving themselves. Never stop learning. When you're given an opportunity to go to a training course, jump on it. If you find a training course that you think would benefit you, bring it up to your supervisor. But you need to always keep learning, because that's going to provide more value to yourself. It's obviously going to provide more value to the company, the more information and knowledge that you get, because when you come out of school as a graduate civil engineer, you obviously know the basics of civil engineering. There's still a lot more to learn, especially in the consulting engineering industry, of how you put a project together. So there's many courses out there available, and I would encourage people to always keep learning. And then when you get that knowledge, share that knowledge with other people.
Yeah, that's great. I love that last part. I mean, you go to your company sends you to some kind of training or a conference, come back and do a 1-hour lunch and learn on lessons learned, and you can then, enlighten another 20, 30, 40, 50 people in your company. That's really providing a lot of value.
Right.
And, one thing that Steve said there reminded me of something that one of our PM instructors here, Ann Tomalavich, says often. She says your technical background is kind of like an invitation to the dinner, and then you've kind of got to put the work in to build all those other skills, right? So when you graduate school, you start working at a firm, that got you in the door, your degree, your technical background, but now you've got to continue to develop those technical skills, but also start learning project management skills and how to interact with people effectively, and that's really going to make you a well-rounded civil engineer. So definitely, to Steve's point, you got to continue to learn if you want to continue to drive more value.
Yep.
So, Steve, if someone approached you and said, Steve, I really want to help out, one of your employees, what's one of the biggest business challenges that I could help solve for the company that would make the single biggest impact on the organization? How would you answer that?
I hate to sound, beating a dead horse, but it's hiring staff. We need help with hiring staff. We got to think outside the box and think of places we can find new engineers. Going back to the pandemic and a hybrid workforce and even a remote workforce, that has kind of opened up the area from which we can draw people. I mean, they can potentially still live in Wyoming and work for us now because we figured out how to do that. But on the flip side, the engineering companies in Wyoming can now recruit people in St. Louis. So we just have to keep thinking outside the box, what our employees want, provide them with a great workplace, challenges project-wise that they can work on, and make it the best place to work that it can be.
No, that's great. And that really, when we work with companies, I'm always saying that there's 3 critical things you have to do to grow. You have to recruit people, you have to develop people, and you have to retain people. Right. And if you're doing those 3 things, the company's eventually going to grow and long-term and sustainably. However, to Steve's point, that recruiting or attracting or hiring professionals right now is just extremely challenging. So you have to think of different ways you can attract them into your organization. One of them definitely could be taking off some of the geographic limitations. Could be the types of training, learning, and development programs that you offer certainly can act as a good magnet. But it is something I think that all firms need to think about, and because it is the biggest challenge. I think we've done maybe 10 or 12 episodes so far, and I think every CEO or president has said that the same challenge, right? So this is not something that is new, so we got to focus on this. Is there anything that you're afraid about, and I would imagine you could say the same thing, with the future of our industry?
It kind of goes back to the workforce of not being able to keep up with the demand. I remember several years ago when maybe there wasn't as much work as you would like, and you were kind of worried about that. Now there is so much investment in infrastructure right now that it goes back to, are we going to have enough engineers to meet that demand? If we don't have enough engineers as an industry as a whole, we may not be able to perform on the IIJA. We may not be able to get all the projects out. And, traditionally engineers are, beating their fists on the table. We need more investment in infrastructure. Well, now we have it, and we need to perform.
It's interesting. I mean, the ebbs and the flows of business and life are amazing. I think at one point in time, I'm sure years ago, we might be saying, are we going to get enough work to keep our company going? And now the question is, are we getting enough people to be able to do all the work? It's just really, the cycle, I guess, of life in a way. But again, it is something that's concerning, and it is something that, it's a good problem to have in a sense, but not if you can't keep up.
Right.
And also another issue that I've seen as a result of this is people getting burnt out in consulting firms because there's just too much work and they can't do it all.
Correct.
All right, so I'm going to, last couple of questions here, Steve, a little bit more focused around your development. Mm-hmm. You're a busy person, president of a busy company. How do you decide what you work on each day? What does that look like for you?
It starts probably as soon as I get up. I start running through my mind what I want to get accomplished that day. I have about a 25-minute commute to St. Louis. So obviously I'm thinking about what I'm going to get done after I get to work, and, grab that first cup of coffee, look at my calendar, make sure there's, no surprises on there that I wasn't prepared for. And that, sometimes I go back, if I have a lot of little things to do, I go back to the old list. So this is what I need to get done today. And I prioritize it of what am I going to get done first. And sometimes it's just getting those quick wins out of the way. I can get A, B, and C done in probably 20 minutes. So let's get that done. I also block out the first 2 hours of my calendar, so meetings aren't scheduled during that time, which allows me 2 hours of really getting some work done. Now, obviously, if something comes up that's very important, I can still meet there. But in general, I'm not going to have meetings from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm really going to try to get a lot of quality work done at that time.
That's great. So you kind of time block those 2 hours, and you have a good idea of what you want to accomplish every day within those 2 hours.
Correct.
And that's from that list that you created earlier in the morning.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think that's a great strategy, because I would imagine that the demands on your time are many, and you get a lot of, messages from different people. So having that, blocked out time in the morning can really be all the difference. I mean, I like to say we have a training on productivity, like establishing those most important tasks or MITs, and getting them done out of the way first. And it sounds like a great way to stay productive.
Yep.
Another question for you. We've talked a lot about development today. Has there been a book that you've read? And I mean, we all read a lot of books, I'm sure, but is there something that stands out for you that you said, hey, I read this book, I implemented something from it, and it's kind of stuck with me, or something that you've done that's stuck with you?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't read a lot of books. One way in which I develop myself, I'm part of a CEO advisory group. So in that case, once a month, I'm meeting with a group of CEOs, and we are talking about issues. We have a speaker each week, and getting a lot of leadership development that way.
That's great. And that was going to be my last question. So you kind of answered it. Was someone in your position, how do you get, when you're kind of at that level in the company, you still need to get mentoring like everyone else and advice like everybody else. So how do you do that? Do you reach out to other executives in the industry? And it sounds like you have something in place that's worked very well.
Yeah, I'm also involved with the American Council of Engineering Companies, and filled with CEOs from other companies. We compete with these companies on a day-to-day basis, but we're also team with them from time to time. So I've developed great relationships with these CEOs, and one in particular, just really tried to emulate his behavior, going back to the fact that he always stays calm. He's very even-keeled. He's very wise. So you could be in a meeting with 10 CEOs talking about a problem in the industry, and he kind of sits back and listens to everybody's input, and you can tell he's just soaking it in. And then at the end, he chimes in with his input, and usually it's like, yeah, you're right, you're spot on. He's kind of like the wise elder in the room. So just being able to be in the room with other CEOs and observe how they manage, how they communicate, has been a big benefit to me.
That's great. And for those of you out there, if you're ever thinking about, getting a mentor, which I always recommend, everyone should have a mentor in their career. I mean, I think this is one of the real benefits of mentorship, right? You get to see other people, you get to see how they react to things, and you can even learn some of those characteristics and try to adopt some of them, because those are the things that you're not necessarily going to learn in school or even in a development program. You have to watch people doing them, and that's what that mentorship can be really valuable for. So once again, Steve Donahue, president at Horner and Shifrin. Steve, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to spend some time with us today on the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Steve. There's lots going on in the civil engineering industry, but what he talked about there in terms of mentoring and seeking mentoring, regardless of what stage in your career you're in, is really important. And I hope that you'll consider going out there and finding the right mentor for you. And please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.